Hello everyone, this is your vocabulary for the Indian removal notes. Our target is to investigate the impact of United States territorial expansion and government policy on Native Americans in the first half of the 19th century. Our question that you're going to focus on then is, why did the U.S. government force Native Americans to move? And then, how did that affect Native American tribes as they were moving and after they moved? The first word is the Indian Removal Act. The Indian Removal Act is a law passed by Congress and signed by President Jackson that allowed the president to force Native Americans to give up their land and to move farther west to the Indian Territory. That's not one that's on your vocabulary page, but it is one you need to understand. This is what it is. So if you need to refer back to what is the Indian Removal Act, this is where you can find that information. It was a law that President Jackson asked Congress to pass. He really, really wanted it, and then he signed it into law. The next word that is on your notes is treaty. A treaty is a contract where both sides agree to act a certain way. Wars usually end in a treaty where the countries agree to stop fighting and respect a border or a boundary. The plural of treaties is treaties, and you just change that Y to an I and add ES. Another word that's related to treaty, that is an advanced vocabulary word, is to entreat. So in a treaty, both sides have asked for something and they agree to what each side gets. Well, to entreat just means to ask. The next word is assimilate. You'll see this in your vocabulary or in the reading as both assimilate, a verb, and assimilation adds an IO ending in ION, and that is a noun then. And you might also see assimilating. So a related word to assimilate, you'll see in the middle of assimilate is the SIMIL, which is the same as similar. So assimilate means to become similar. When something or someone causes a person or group to become part of a different culture or society, they are causing that person or group to assimilate. So you see here, there are a bunch of American Girl dolls. They seem to all have assimilated into the same culture because they're dressing in a very similar fashion, even though it looks like they came perhaps from very different cultures. So assimilate means to cause someone to become a part of a certain culture. Andrew Jackson and the U.S. government wanted Native Americans to assimilate into white American culture. One way the U.S. government tried to force Native Americans to assimilate into white American culture was by requiring Native children to attend boarding schools in the first half of the 1900s. At the boarding schools, the children could not speak their native languages or wear their traditional clothing. Here you see a picture of, appears to be Native American girls who are saying their bedtime prayers at the boarding school, and they were forced to practice Christianity, even though that was not their traditional religions, because that was part of white American culture, was this religion. And so religion, how they were dressed, their hairstyles, you see nice little pigtails on that cute little girl who's looking at the camera. Well, that would have been the hairstyle that the people at the boarding school wanted her to have. If she was home with her Native American family, that might not have been the hairstyle that they would have put her in. Also, if they came to boarding school only speaking a native language, they were punished whenever they spoke it, and so they didn't have a language to speak for a while for many of them. They had to speak English, and otherwise they were punished. So that is assimilation, trying to force someone into another culture. Another word that you'll see in the text is generation. The text talks about many generations have lived in one place. A generation is the people born and living during the same time. That is one generation. So many generations are pictured here, where you see a child, a parent, a grandparent, and in the case of the women at the bottom, you see a great-grandmother and a great-great-grandmother, it looks like. So there are 5 generations of women in that picture and 3 generations of men in the picture at the top. People who were born between 1981 and 1996 are called millennials. For many of you, that's your parents. You guys might consider yourselves part of Generation Z, which was born between 1997 and 2010. That's Gen Z. You might also consider yourself part of the next generation, and there's not really a firm name for that generation that I have heard yet. So you're kind of right between. I'm also right between generation, where sometimes people call me a millennial and sometimes people call me before a millennial. So that is a generation. Another word you're going to see frequently that I don't believe is in your notes is Indian Territory. The land west of the Mississippi River, which the federal government forced several Native American tribes onto using treaties, was called the Indian Territory. The land that was the Indian Territory longest was Oklahoma, but Kansas was also part of Indian Territory, as were several parts of other states. It was just the land west of the Mississippi at first, and as time went on, the Indian Territory shrank. The federal government made it smaller and smaller and forced these Native Americans to move many times, using more treaties. The last word is truce. When enemies or opponents agree to stop fighting or arguing for a certain period of time, they have called a truce. So here, two soldiers from two different sides are shaking hands. They have agreed to stop fighting, but just for a little bit. That one's a reenactment. A real truce was the Christmas truce of 1914, which took place during World War I, when soldiers from both sides started singing Christmas carols and playing soccer together. It was Christmas Day. They wanted to have a holiday, and so they did. Their commanders made sure they had to fight every Christmas Day after that to prevent such a thing from happening again. And the one you'll read about in the textbook is the truce that was used by the United States government to capture the man pictured here, Osceola. When the U.S. military was fighting against the Seminole Indians in Florida, the U.S. used a fake truce to capture the Seminole leader Osceola, who then died while held prisoner by the U.S. military.